Let me talk about something that most men over 60 are terrified to admit, and yet almost every single one of them has experienced. You're in the moment. Things are heating up. You want to be there fully, completely. She wants you there, but down below, you're at maybe 70%. Or worse, you start out with a solid erection, and then halfway through, you feel it beginning to fade. You try to focus. You try to squeeze, to hold on, to will it back. But it's like trying to hold water in your hands. It slips away regardless of how hard you try. And when that happens, the mind immediately goes to the darkest place available. You think, this is it. This is the decline I was warned about. You think, I have ED. You think, I need medication. I need intervention. Something is fundamentally wrong with me. And that thought, that moment of quiet panic, makes everything worse almost instantly. I'm Dr. Julia Rodaz, a men's intimacy therapist who has spent years working specifically with men over 60, navigating the very real physical and psychological challenges that come with this stage of life. And I want to say something to you directly before we go any further. You are not broken. You do not have a broken body. What you are most likely experiencing has a specific cause, a specific mechanism, and a specific solution. And none of it requires medication. And none of it is evidence that your best years are behind you. What you are likely dealing with is something I describe to the men in my practice as the pelvic clamp. It is a specific pattern of tension in the pelvic floor that physically restricts blood flow to the penis. And once you understand exactly what it is and why it happens, particularly in men over 60, you will have access to a solution that is completely natural, completely within your control, and often more effective than anything a prescription could offer. Let me explain how this works, starting with the basic mechanics of an erection. Because understanding the mechanics is the first step to understanding why things sometimes go wrong and, more importantly, how to put them right. An erection requires two things to happen simultaneously. First, the arteries need to relax and open, allowing blood to rush into the erectile tissue. Second, the veins need to close, trapping that blood inside. When blood rushes in faster than it can escape, pressure builds, and that pressure is your erection. It is at its core a hydraulic system. And like any hydraulic system, it can be blocked. Here is where the pelvic clamp comes in. The pubococcyagus, the PC muscle, is the hammock of muscle that sits at the base of your pelvis. It surrounds the base of the penis, the urethra, and the anus. When you are relaxed, this muscle is soft and pliable and blood vessels run through it freely. But when you are anxious, stressed, or when you have been sitting for extended periods, all of which are common realities for men overall, 60, that muscle can develop a chronic habitual tension, a clamp. And that clamp acts exactly like a foot pressing down on a garden hose. Think of it this way. Your heart is the faucet. The blood is the water. The penis is a balloon waiting to be filled. If there is a kink in the hose, if you are pressing down on the line right at the base, it does not matter how wide the faucet is open. The water cannot get through the kink. You end up with a balloon that is 60 or 70% full, soft in the middle, not rock hard, and you stand there wondering what is wrong with the balloon when the entire problem is the foot on the hose. Before I go any further into the research, and I want to make sure you have everything you need to act on what I am sharing today, I want to tell you about something I have created for the men on this channel. Because here is the thing, understanding that sexual activity matters for your health is important, but knowing what to do about it, especially if you are navigating performance challenges or if the intimacy in your relationship has become complicated, or if you simply want a complete guided step-by-step framework for your sexual health after 60. That requires more than a single video. I created a program that pieces the entire puzzle of men's sexual health together. From fixing erection and performance challenges from both the physical and the psychological angle to specific techniques and approaches that make a man genuinely exceptional in bed after 60. Not despite his age, but because of the deeper understanding and intentional skill that comes with it. To how to bring your partner to the same level of desire as you so that intimacy becomes a shared, mutual, deeply satisfying experience again, rather than something you are pursuing alone. Everything pieced together, every piece connected like someone guiding you by the hand from the very beginning to the very end. I made a full video walking through exactly what the program covers and why it works. That video is pinned in the comments section right now. The link is also in the video description below. Go watch it after this video ends because what we cover today is one essential foundational principle, and that program is the complete picture that goes with it. Now, back to the science, because what comes next is something most men have genuinely never heard explained clearly. Now, why are men over 60 particularly vulnerable to this pattern? Several reasons, and they compound each other in ways that are important to understand. First, there's the simple reality of reduced physical activity. Men over 60 on average spend more time sitting than they did at any earlier point in their lives. Retirement, recovery from injury, changes in daily routine. All of these reduce the natural movement that would otherwise keep the pelvic floor flexible and well circulated. Chronic sitting creates chronic pelvic floor tension. That tension becomes the new baseline, and the body stops registering it as tension at all. It simply becomes how things are. The muscles that should be soft and pliable are instead held in a state of low-grade contraction that never fully releases. And that contraction is always there, squeezing the hose, even in moments when the man himself is completely unaware of it. Second, and perhaps more significantly, there is the accumulation of performance anxiety. For a man in his 20s or 30s, a single episode of losing an erection is disappointing, but rarely catastrophic. He recovers quickly, physically and psychologically. For a man in his 60s, that same episode can become a turning point. It confirms a fear he has been carrying often quietly for years, that his body is betraying him, that his sexuality is in terminal decline, that he is past the age where this is supposed to work reliably. And that fear, once established, becomes its own source of tension, which creates exactly the pelvic clamp that causes the next episode, which deepens, the fear which tightens the clamp further. A cycle that feeds itself and that, without intervention, tends to get progressively worse over time. Third, there is the broader reality of stress accumulation. Men over 60 are not, as our culture sometimes implies, free from significant stress. The stresses of this life stage, health concerns, financial anxieties, the shifting of relationships, the loss of friends and family members, the quiet grief of a life moving into its later chapters are real and substantial. And stress in the body lives in the pelvic floor. How? How do you know if you have this kind of chronic pelvic tension? There is a clear indicator that I describe to the men I work with. When you look at your penis in a relaxed state, when you are simply walking around or stepping out of the shower, does it appear shriveled? Does it seem to pull back toward the body almost like it is retreating inward? Does it feel hard or rubbery even when it is completely flaccid? This is not simply a feature of aging or cold temperatures. This is your pelvic floor muscles chronically tight, physically pulling the penis inward. If you recognize that pattern, you almost certainly have the pelvic clamp. And that tension is very likely the primary driver of what you have been experiencing in the bedroom. So, what do you do about it? Let me start by telling you what not to do. Because the most common instinct, the thing that almost every man reaches for when he begins to feel an erection fading, is to squeeze, to flex, to bear down, and try to force things back. And I understand exactly why. It feels like doing something. It feels like taking control of a situation that is slipping away from you. But squeezing a chronically tense pelvic floor is like seeing a kink in the garden hose and pressing down harder with your foot. You are not solving the problem. You are intensifying it. You are adding more tension to a system that is already suffering from too much tension, and the result, almost without exception, is that the erection fades faster. You may also have heard that the solution to erection problems is Kegel exercises, pelvic floor exercises designed to strengthen the PC muscle. And it is true that a strong pelvic floor is important for strong erections. But here's the nuance that is almost never explained. If your pelvic floor is chronically tight, if the clamp is already engaged, then doing more Kegel exercises is adding strength to tension. Snorts. It is making the clamp stronger, not releasing it. For men in this situation, Kegel alone will make things worse, not better. What you actually need is the reverse. The technique is called the reverse Kegel, And it is, as the name suggests, the exact opposite of what most men have been taught to do. Instead of pulling the pelvic floor up, and in which is the standard Keely motion, the sensation of stopping the flow of urine midstream, I want you to push down and out. Here is the feeling I want you to locate. Imagine you are urinating and you want to push the stream out faster and stronger. What do? You push down and out with the lower abdomen and the pelvic floor. You feel a dropping and expansion between the legs, a sense of release in the base of the pelvis. That is the reverse cool. If you want a less refined reference point, the feeling is similar to what happens physically when you pass gas. You are not clenching. You are actively relaxing and pushing outward. When you perform that push out motion, you are mechanically releasing the PC muscle. You are actively taking your foot off the hose. And the moment you do that, the moment the clamp releases, the arteries that were partially blocked open up. The blood that was backed up behind the restriction rushes in, and your erection does not just return. It returns fuller and firmer than it was before. Because for the first time, the balloon is filling to its actual capacity rather than being choked off partway through. For men over 60, practicing this motion regularly, not just in the bedroom, but as a daily practice, can produce results that seem almost miraculous compared to what they were experiencing before. I have worked with men in their late 60s and 70s who had largely given up on the possibility of consistent, reliable erections, who had quietly accepted that this part of their life was simply over, and who, within a matter of weeks of practicing this technique, reported a quality and consistency of erection they had not experienced in years. But here is what I need you to understand. The technique alone is only half of the solution. And this is the part that most men and most men's health content never addresses adequately. You can practice the reverse cule every day. You can master the physical motion of releasing the pelvic floor. But if you do not understand and address why the hose is kink-kicked in the first place, the tension will return the moment your attention moves elsewhere. The clamp will re-engage because the pelvic clamp is not primarily a physical problem. It is a nervous system problem. And for men over 60, the nervous system dimension of this is particularly important. Your body, like every human body, operates in two primary modes. The first is the parasympathetic nervous system, what physiologists call rest and digest. This is the mode of safety, of restoration, of relaxed pleasure. This is the mode in which erections happen. An erection is a biological expression of safety. It cannot occur in any other state. The second mode is the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. This is the survival mode, the state of vigilance and protection. When the brain perceives threat, real or imagined, blood is redirected away from the genitals and toward the muscles needed for fight or escape. The pelvic floor clamps down to protect the body's vital structures. Digestion pauses. Sexual function ceases. The body is doing exactly what it is designed to do in the presence of danger. Here is where this becomes critically relevant for what happens in the bedroom. When a man over 60 feels an erection beginning to fade, his brain, regardless of the actual situation, interprets that moment as a threat. Not a saber-toothed tiger, but the threat of failure, of inadequacy, of disappointing the woman he loves, of confirming his deepest fear about what age has done to him. And the brain responds to that perceived threat exactly as it responds to any threat. It engages the fight or flight response, redirects blood away from the penis, and clamps the pelvic floor shut, which makes the erection fade faster, which intensifies the perceived threat, which deepens the sympathetic response, which clamps the floor tighter. This is why trying harder, squeezing, forcing, focusing intensely on the erection makes things worse every single time. You are not fighting the problem. You are generating exactly the neurological state that causes it. You cannot stress yourself into an erection. You can only relax into one. This is the truth that changes everything for men over 60. Because once you understand it, the entire strategy reverses. Instead of trying to force the erection back, you create the conditions in which it can return on its own. You shift from sympathetic to parasympathetic, from threat to safety, from fight or flight to rest and restore. And the most powerful, most direct, most immediate tool for making that shift is the breath. Not chest breathing, the shallow, anxious breathing that most men default to when they are stressed. Chest breathing actually amplifies the sympathetic nervous system response. It signals urgency to the brain. It makes things worse. I mean deep belly breathing. When you inhale, your belly should expand outward, pushing forward. Your chest should remain relatively still. The breath fills the lower lungs. The diaphragm drops, the belly rises. When you exhale, the belly falls, the diaphragm rises, and with it, if you allow it, the pelvic floor releases slightly, softening the clamp just a fraction more. Why does this work physiologically? The vagus nerve, the primary communication highway of the parasympathetic nervous system, runs directly through the diaphragm. When you breathe deeply into the belly, you are physically stimulating that nerve. You are sending a direct biochemical signal to the brain. I am safe. The threat has passed. You may now redirect resources toward rest, toward restoration, toward the things the body does in the presence of safety. That signal sent through the breath is more direct and more effective than any amount of mental willpower. You cannot think your way into a parasympathetic state, but you can breathe your way there. Here's the protocol I teach the men in my practice. When you feel yourself at 70%, when you feel the tension beginning to creep in and the erection beginning to soften, stop trying to force your way through it. Take a breath instead. Do the reverse cule first. Push down and out. Actively release the pelvic floor. Then simultaneously take a deep, slow belly breath. Feel the abdomen expand on the inhale. Allow everything to soften on the exhale. Do this for 3 to 5 breaths unhurried without monitoring or evaluating. And here is the element that makes the difference between a technique and a transformation. While you are breathing, let go of the outcome. I know how counterintuitive that sounds. Letting go of the outcome is precisely the opposite of what every instinct is screaming at you to do. But here is the physiological reality. The moment you are monitoring the erection, checking it, evaluating it, anxiously waiting to see if the technique is working, you are generating the exact sympathetic activation that is blocking the erection in the first place. The monitoring is the threat. The watching is the danger signal that keeps the clamp engaged. Consider what that monitoring actually feels like from the inside. It is a kind of standing outside yourself, observing your own body as if you were a critic evaluating a performance. And that observer position, by its very nature, removes you from the experience of intimacy and places you in a state of evaluation. Evaluation is a sympathetic activity. It is analytical, vigilant, assessing for risk. It is the opposite of the absorbed, present, safe state in which erections arise naturally. A man who is fully present, fully absorbed in the sensory experience of intimacy, not evaluating or monitoring or managing, that man is in a deep parasympathetic state. His pelvic floor is naturally relaxed. His arteries are open. His erection is a natural byproduct of his presence, not something he is struggling to produce or maintain. This is, in my experience, the single most significant shift available to men over 60 who are struggling with erection quality. Not a supplement, not a medication, not a physical exercise. The shift from monitoring to presence, from doing to allowing, from anxiety about the erection to genuine absorption in the experience of intimacy. For men of this generation, men clears throat who were raised to be providers, to perform, to solve problems, to never show weakness. This shift requires real work because it asks something that the masculine conditioning of a lifetime has not prepared you for. It asks you to let go of control in order to allow something to happen naturally. It asks you to trust your body rather than overriding it. It asks you to be in the experience rather than managing it from the outside. But here is what I know from years of watching men make this shift. When they do, the results are extraordinary. Not marginal, not slight improvements. Men who had largely given up on the possibility of reliable, satisfying erections, discovering that their bodies were never actually broken, they were simply clamped. And the moment the clamp releases, the capacity that was always there becomes available again. The belly breath combined with the reverse cule is the most direct physical pathway to that release. Practice it not just in the bedroom, but throughout the day. When you are sitting for long periods, practice pushing down and out every hour or so. A brief, intentional release of pelvic floor tension that prevents the chronic accumulation that leads to the clamp. Practice belly breathing during any moment of stress or anxiety. not because those moments are causing erection problems in that instant, but because they are contributing to the accumulated baseline tension that will show up later. Think of it as maintaining the hose, not waiting until the balloon fails to fill, but keeping the line clear day by day as a practice of ongoing care for your body and for your intimate life. And I want to emphasize that word practice because this is not something you do once and then return to old habits. The pelvic clamp develops over years of accumulated tension, stress, and habitual holding patterns. Releasing it is not a single event. It is a practice of consistent, daily attention, a new relationship with your own body, one built on awareness rather than force. The men in my practice who see the most lasting change are not the ones who try the techniques once and declare victory. They are the ones who incorporate the reverse Kegel and the belly breath into the fabric of their daily lives, who begin to notice pelvic tension throughout the day and release it, who breathe into the belly as a habit rather than a crisis response, who gradually retrain their nervous system to return to a baseline of relaxation rather than chronic vigilance. That retraining takes time, but it is entirely possible. And the men who commit to it consistently describe a change not just in their erection quality, but in their overall sense of well being, presence, and ease in their own bodies. Now, I also want to be honest with you about one additional dimension of this because the men I work with deserve honesty more than they deserve comfortable half truths. The pelvic clamp and the nervous system response I have described account for a very large proportion of erection difficulties in men over 60, but they are not the only factor. Blood flow quality and hormonal health also play a role. And for some men, optimizing those areas is part of a complete approach to erection quality. If your cardiovascular health is not where it should be, if your diet and sleep are significantly compromised, if there are underlying medical conditions that have not been addressed, those factors will limit how fully the techniques I have described can work. This is not a reason for discouragement. It is simply an honest acknowledgement that you are a whole person and your sexual health is connected to your overall health in every direction. Snorts. The reverse cuel and the belly breath are powerful tools. They are for many men the most important tools available, but they work best as part of a broader commitment to the physical and emotional well being that makes a full, vital, intimate life possible at any age, because that is the deeper truth I want to leave you with. A man over 60 who still wants this, who still cares enough to learn, to adjust, to show up differently, that man is not past his prime. He is not beyond help. He is not fighting a battle he has already lost. He is a man with a body that is responding exactly as bodies respond to the specific circumstances of his life, and which can respond very differently when those circumstances change. You are not broken. The hose is kinkeked, and now you know how to unsink it. Start with the reverse curl. Add the belly breath. Practice both daily, not just in moments of difficulty. Learn to shift from monitoring to presence, from managing the erection to inhabiting the experience. And give your body the patience and consistency it deserves after a lifetime of carrying you through everything you have asked of it. I want to come back to something I mentioned earlier because everything we have covered today makes it even more relevant now than it was then. We have talked about penile tissue oxygenation, about testosterone, and the birectional feedback loop that sexual activity sustains, about prostate health, about cognitive function, about relationship vitality, and about the psychological spiral that inactivity creates and that compounds with every revolution. Every single one of these pillars points to the same conclusion. Staying sexually active after 60 is one of the most important things a man can do for his health, his relationship, and his quality of life. But I know that for many of the men watching this, that conclusion raises an immediate and very practical question. How? How do I stay active when performance has become challenging? How do I rebuild intimacy when distance has already developed? How do I bring my partner back to the same level of desire when we have been operating on different levels for months or years? How do I go from knowing this matters to actually living it? That is exactly what the program I mentioned earlier addresses. It is a complete guided step-by-step system for men's sexual health after 60. It covers fixing erection and performance challenges from both the physical and psychological angle. It covers specific techniques and approaches that make a man genuinely exceptional in bed after 60. not despite his age, but because of the depth, intentionality, and skill that this phase of life makes possible. And it covers how to bring your partner back to your level, how to close the desire gap, reignite the intimate connection, and create a shared, intimate life that works beautifully for both of you. Everything connected, everything guided, nothing left out. I made a full video walking through exactly what the program covers and why it works. That video is pinned in the comment section right now. The link is also in the description below this video. If today's video resonated with you, if the use it or lose it principle landed with the weight it deserves, and you want the complete roadmap for acting on it, go watch that video next. It is the natural continuation of everything we have discussed today. The link is right there. Do not scroll past it. If any of this has resonated, if you have recognized yourself in what I have described today, please leave a comment below. These conversations matter deeply. They help men who are suffering in unnecessary silence understand that they are not alone, that what they are experiencing has a cause and a solution, and that the intimate life they want is genuinely still available to them. I'm Dr. Julia Rhodes, and I'll see you in the next video.